Here is the September Video Kit Club card up close and personal. I'm going to be showing you guys a lot of fun embossing tips and tricks, and I can give you an option at the end. Remind me, just kidding, I know you can't do that. An option at the end for adding a little bit of glitter. So I just want to really quick go over what you're going to get in this kit because it's quite exciting. You're going to get 3 Sparkle and Sprinkle embossing powders. You're going to be getting copper, Chartreuse, and Petal Pink. You're also going to be receiving the stamp set. This is so beautiful. I feel like I designed like 100 cards before I came to this card. So there's so many different options. That large flower is really just gorgeous. Here's one where I did a little watercoloring. Here's where I did a little stamping and embossing on black. So there's a lot of fun options with this stamp set. It also comes with digital papers. They're not included in this kit this month, but make sure you check out the stamp release on the 15th of the month and you'll see all the goodies that this bad boy that's available that coordinate with that stamp set. You're also going to be receiving the brand new Nouveau Clear Mark. So this is a clear embossing pad, and I've been playing with it and really quite like it. There's a lot of fun things that you can do with this. If you've never done embossing powder, this is a great way to get started because I'm going to show you, I'm going to go into the basics and then just get a little bit more carried away. So you're going to be receiving the stamp set, the embossing powders, the ink pad. We're also giving you a static free bag that is going to be included in your kit. If you already have one, you can have one in your bag as well as on at your craft table. You can give one to a friend. It's a really great must-have if you are doing heat embossing. And then you're going to be receiving 20 mini brads for your cards as well. And like every month, you're going to be receiving the envelopes and the cards that go with creating your card here. All right, to get started, I'm going to go ahead as well and tell you all of the measurements. So I'm going to run down that first, so in case you're watching the video and you want to pause it and get everything ready, I'm going to run down those first. So we'll leave this here. Obviously you have the card base, and that is the 5.5 by 4 1/4. And then layer number 1, which is the solid copper that you see, that is going to be 5 1/4 by 4. I have tiny little chicken scratches just to remind me. And then the next layer is going to be 5 by 3 1/4, and that is this white layer here. And then 4 1/4 by 3 is layer 3. 4 3/4 is layer 4, which is this one here. And then layer 5, this tiny little one, is 2 and 1.5. So that is this guy right here. So there are 5 layers to this card. Well, 6 if you're including the card base. And all of this will be in the instructions. So if you've received the kit, it's sitting in front of you, all of that is written down. All right, so we are going to take a little piece of scrap paper, and we are going to be stamping directly on our white card base. So like I said, this is 5.5 by 4 1/4. And from my stamp set, it's nice because you have 2 leaf choices. So there's a smaller like fallen leaf and then a larger like petal leaf. And I'm going to be taking a block. I'm going to be using 3 different blocks here. I only have one of my favorite block, so I use that for my saying, and then I have a couple other little blocks that I'm going to be using for my other stamps during this video. So I'm going to take my clear embossing pad, and then I'm going to have my static free bag ready. So I'm going to go ahead and use my static free bag whenever I'm doing stamping onto my cardstock. So I'm going to go ahead and just rub that around the edges because that's all we're going to do. Now if you get a lot of extra powder, you can tap off a little bit of it. A lot of the time I just rub my static bag on and then stamp over it, but just in case you get a big like pile of powder, you can tap off a little bit of it. So what you want to make sure that you do is you stamp your ink pad, you stamp your stamp into your ink pad every time you stamp. So I'm gonna hit it with some embossing. I'm also using my fingernails instead of touching my card. I'm kind of holding my cardstock in place by using my fingernails. And I am just going to do like a little toss pattern all around the edges. Something also very important while you're doing heat embossing is your lighting. Like you can see here, maybe you guys can see, yeah, you can see right there when the light hits the embossing powder. Not the embossing powder, sorry, the clear ink. You can see where you've positioned your stamps. So having good lighting is very important. Some other nice tools to have are your tweezer tool, you need your heat embosser, and I also like to have a little sparkle spoon, which will help distribute the embossing powder. A dry brush too, if you get like a big chunk, if you put a fingerprint on, so before you heat it, you can use a little dry brush and wipe it off. Okay, now that I have my complete border stamped around, I put a little EP on this, meaning this is my embossing pad. This is going to be the base, so I don't get ink on my coffee filters. So now that I have used that, I'm going to set that aside, take a nice dry coffee filter, and then I'm going to use my copper. So I'm just going to sprinkle my copper all around. If you want to choose a different color, if you want to use the Chartreuse for this, that will be really pretty too. I'm just going to stick to what my sample looks like that I created. And then I'm going to go ahead and sprinkle wherever I have a little extra copper needed. Give that a good tap, a dry brush, a little blow to make sure that you don't have any embossing powder sticking around. So this is a fingerprint right there. Do you see that? So what I'm going to do is take this brush and just wipe that away before I heat set it. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and heat set this, and I'm going to speed this up. Okay, that is nice and heat set. I could see that it went from a powdery consistency to like a nice shiny finish, and that means everything was embossed. You're only going to see 1/4 of an inch on all the sides of this. So like I've got my little fingerprints and stuff in the inside of that. I'm not going to be worried about that. This is going to be the very back layer. So I'm going to go ahead and set that aside. I am next going to be doing the layer number 1 is what I call it, but I guess we should call it layer number 2, is this one here, this solid copper. And what we're gonna do is do 2 layers of embossing powder and the, oh my goodness, ooh, there we go. My dog just needed to get up on the bed, or he's gonna just keep tapping around. Let me up. All right, I am next gonna take my largest layer, here we are, the 5 1/4 by 4, and what we are going to do is, once again, I'm going to use this scrap piece of paper as like a mat to protect it so I don't get the pigment ink on my coffee filter. And I'm going to take my embossing ink, and I am just going to, once again, just 1/4 of this is going to be shown, so I'm just going to give it a little here, a little there, repeat all 4 corners just like that of your clear embossing ink. And then you're just going to go ahead and add your copper embossing powder around the whole thing. Now I am going to go ahead, I guess it helps if there we go. Okay, so what I'm going to do is sprinkle this on, tap that off so you can see where I put my ink. And what you're going to want to do is heat set this, let that cool after you heat set, and then come back over it again on all the edges so you can do 2 layers. And I already did one here with all the lights and the embossing powder. It is super warm in here, so I pre-did some of them. So you can see right here where it was the 2 layers. So it's lighter here versus darker up here. So you can see that second layer. And when it starts to bubble, just continue to go over it and those bubbles will pop and you'll get this nice, really beautiful, smooth surface. And I just love what that finished look looks like. Okay, so now we've got layer number 2 done. So I've got my leaf background and my beautiful solid copper background. Next we are going to work on the layer number 3, and that is a 5" by a 3 3/4 inch. And I am going to use one of my favorite new little tools, which is this mini paper cutter, and this is the 8.5 one. It's a great little travel size, and I'm just going to use this grid to do a little pencil mark on the 1/4 inch mark of my corners, which is where I am going to do a hole punch for my brads. So I'm just eyeballing it. I'm taking this line here and this line here. So you can use, if you have a mat with... All right, once you have all your little marks, what I'm going to do is take my crafting tool pick and just go ahead and poke holes in between. My hole punch is a little bit larger, so go ahead and poke 4 holes, and I just held them. I just held up my corner and I just poked it right through, which made it pretty easy. If you have a tiny little hole punch, you can use that. Any tool that works for you when you are punching your holes will be great. Okay, once that is done, I'm going to go ahead and show you a really simple, fun trick for basically creating your brads and making them super cool. So for this, you are going to have to use a metal tweezer, or if you don't have a metal tweezer, you could possibly take a pair of metal scissors and hold it at the end. But this is very hot, so make sure you're being very careful. If you are young, please don't do this without an adult helping you with most embossing. Okay, so what I'm going to do is take my brad, and this is one of those nice tweezers. We have these available online where you don't have to securely hold it. It's the reverse one. So what I'm going to do is just simply heat set my brad. You don't even need any ink for this. I am getting that metal brad nice and hot, and then I'm just dipping it right into my copper embossing powder, heating it again. I didn't get it hot enough the first time, or it would have actually just melted right there. So I'm going to do it one more time to make sure I have a really nice brad created for you. There you go. See that? So really fun, really simple. And I'm going to show you even well, I did 2 large ones here so you can see. So this is the plain brad with the copper on it, so you can see how beautiful that is. So you can take any brad and make it any color embossing powder you have, which is really fun. And then if you want to get the glittery version, all I did was use our Bronze Splender, heat that embossing powder up again and dip it into your embossing powder, and then just give it a light tap of heat, and that's how you can get a really fun permanent glittery brad. All right, now that this is nice and cool, I've waited a few minutes, you can take that guy out and put that into your your 3 corners. There are 4 brads, but you are going to use one of your brads to secure down 2 pieces of your layers. So I'm just going to put 3 brads in for now, and then we're going to come back to that 3rd brad when we've completed our last layer. So there's my 3 brads, and I've got that one guy just waiting right there, and I'm going to go ahead and set that layer aside. So moving on to the next layer, we are going to do a really fun, like a marbled effect. So it's this pink and copper background, and I am going to take my 4 1/4 by 3, which is this one right here, and I got some embossing powder on my ink, so we don't want that. I am going to take my embossing pad again and go over my edges. Once again, just 1/4 of your edges are going to be shown, so you don't have to go too far up the paper. And with this one, I'm going over the edges Then we are going to sprinkle our Petal Pink embossing powder over all of those 4 edges and heat set. Like I said, it is super hot in my office with all the lighting, so I went ahead and pre-heat set. And I'm just doing 1 layer. Next, what you're gonna do is you are just simply going to take a piece of a paper towel. So this is just a paper towel cut into quarters. And I'm just gonna bunch that up, and I'm going to take my embossing ink and dip it right in there. And we are just going to sponge right over the edges. And you can do a little bit, you can do a lot. You can do more than 1 color if you wanted to. So a really simple tool, really simple technique, and it has such a beautiful after effect. So once you've done that, I'm going to take a dry coffee filter without any embossing ink on it. And I'm going to take my copper again, and I'm just going to sprinkle that right over my pink. Oh, and I really like this one. It's going to be different every time too, so that's fun, is they're all going to be one of a kind. So see how I've got a couple open space here? If you want to, after you heat set it, you can come back and add a little bit more copper if you'd like. I'm going to go ahead and heat set and speed this up. All right, and you can see that that is nice and glossy now. I'm actually just gonna leave it the way it is. I don't want it to be super perfect. And once that's covered, you're not really gonna pay attention to that as much anyways. Now another quick trick with heat setting, you wanna make sure you're blowing your heat away from you. If you're blowing the heat towards you, you might burn your fingers or burn yourself, and you don't want it. It's currently way hot enough in California. Okay, so now that we have that layer completed, we are going to move on to the next layer, which is the, where is my next layer? There it is. Ha! Look at that. You thought I totally messed up, right? Well, I did. Just in case you had faith in me. I totally gave up. Okay, so next you're going to find your 4 by 3 3/4, and that is going to be your stamped layer. So one thing you want to make sure you're doing is you're not handling all of your cardstock. If you've got embossing ink or even just the oils from your hand can get your embossing powder to stick to where your fingers were. So what I'm going to do now again is take my static free bag and just go over it. And I'm using my fingernails now to hold that in place. If you don't have any fingernails, you can use the tip of your scissors or you can use a paintbrush. All right, and we are gonna stamp it. So now I'm gonna be using this smaller Magnolia that doesn't have any of the leaves on it. And my light just went out. There we go. It's that kind of day. All right, so we're gonna be using the smaller Magnolia. So I have it here on this little block. I am going to take my clear mark embossing pad and I'm going to ink that up really nicely. Now I am going to be, with that smaller piece, that last layer, it's going to be like covering right about there. So I want to make sure this first one that I do is fully exposed. So I'm going to do it right there. Stamp that down, and I'm just stamping my first stamp of my small Magnolia, and then I'm going to take the copper embossing powder, tap that off, and see how nice and smooth that just floated off the paper. It didn't stick on fingerprints or anything, so that's why handling your paper as little as possible is very important. Heat set. And it goes from a powder finish to see that glossy finish. That's how you know that it is fully embossed. So I'm gonna take that same flower again, and you can Swiffer over it. Make sure it's cool, but you can Swiffer over it again, especially if you've been handling it with your fingers. We're just ignoring my light. And I am going to ink it into my embossing ink. And now this is going to basically be my center. So I'm just going to take my flowers, and I don't want to overlap any, so that's when your lighting is super important. Good thing mine went out. Guessing is also very important. So I'm just going around. That'll work. And now I am going to take another coffee filter, and we are going to be doing a little bit of layering. So I am going to take my really cool sparkle spoon, and I am just going to be going over little bits of my flowers. I'm kind of hitting the ends of the flower, the ends of the petals, as well as the center of the magnolia. I want the center to be green, and then I'm just kind of hitting a little bit of the ends just so it's kind of looks more natural. Because you know when you see flowers, they have a little green in their petals, which is really pretty. Okay, that is good. Just a quick little tap, tap, tap of that. Now what you want to do, instead of dropping that to its side, you want to give it a quick flip. So that makes it where all of that chartreuse stays exactly where we just placed it. And next I'm going to take that Petal Pink. So once you've done your first step, all that embossing powder is going to stay there. You don't have to heat it yet. So this is called batik embossing, using more than one embossing powder color. And I'm going to go ahead and sprinkle my Petal Pink. Tap that. And then I'm going to go ahead and heat set that. So once again, I'm going to make sure the heat gun is aimed away from me. Okay, once you have completed heat embossing, you can see how nice that looks with the mix of the chartreuse and the Petal Pink, which looks so pretty together, and then our one copper flower, which stands out among the rest. Okay, so set that aside, and then our very last layer is this teeny tiny one, which was 2 by 1.5. And what we are going to do is take our clear mark and go over the whole thing. Pop that guy off, and then you're going to cover that with chartreuse. So I'm going to take my clean coffee filter, just go over the whole thing with chartreuse. You're going to want to heat set. So heat set, heat set, heat set, let that cool. Do another layer of clear mark right over that. And then do another layer of chartreuse, heat set, and then if you need a third layer, go ahead and do a third layer. It may take 2 or 3 layers to get a really nice solid green. You want to make sure you have a nice solid area because we're going to be stamping on it. All right, so I'm going to set that aside, and we are all done with that. And I am going to take my stamp, and I am using the Delight in the Beauty That Surrounds You. And there's also another really beautiful saying in the stamp set, but I've chosen, which is Gentle Thoughts During These Difficult Days, which I think is really nice too. It's subtle. That can go for a lot of things. That can go for recovery, that can go for a sympathy card, that can even just go for someone going through a rough time. So it's really nice. I love the 2 sayings that are included in this stamp set. All right, so I'm gonna take my base that I've done, and I did 3 layers on this one, so you can see that that is a really nice layer of embossing powder, and it kind of looks like metal. I love the way the layered embossing powders look. Okay, so very important, you want to take your static free bag and go over the whole thing. And if you have a, which I have this guy here, if you have a stamp platform, because it's a very slick surface, it might be nice to set up this guy like with your stamp platform, situated where the words are nice and straight. But because I know not everyone has a stamp platform, I am going to align my seine on my acrylic block here. And this guy is ready to go. And I am going to take my clear mark, stamp that in. And just go ahead and stamp that evenly right there. Make sure you don't smear it. And then once you have your image stamped on, I'm going to take a clean coffee filter and sprinkle copper right over it, which is nice. This is a really fun technique, double embossing. So not only did we emboss the background, but now we're also embossing, we're going to heat emboss over it. So I am going to now take my heat tool and heat set. And you don't want to overheat it since it's words. Just make sure you see it melt and then move on. So look at how beautiful that turns out, and it actually raises it a little bit. So it's really pretty. It has a very rich and elegant look to it. And then to finish it off, and this is our very last step of embossing, you are going to dip all 4 edges into your clear mark. Add your copper embossing powder. And it's okay if a little raises up there statically. I want it to look a little bit more mixed media and not so perfect. All right, now I'm going to go ahead and heat set my 4 edges, and then we are going to assemble. There we go. Okay. There you have your, sorry, that was my chair. There you have your 4 edges. We are using all of our power in Southern California, so my poor little light keeps going out. All right, so now we're going to assemble. I am just going to take my Craft Pic, and I'm gonna want to just make sure this is where the brad is going to be going through, like in our final card right there. So I'm just gonna eyeball it. If you want to measure it out, you can do like 1/4 by 1/4 again. I'm just gonna go ahead and eyeball it, stick my Craft Pic through, and then we're gonna start to assemble. I'm gonna take a little piece of Terrific tape and add it to the top left corner here on the back. And then to assemble, we are actually going to start with this layer here. So I'm gonna peel off my Terrific tape. And I like using Terrific tape when I'm embossing or using watercolor. So just in case the actual paper gets bowed, the Terrific tape is such a great adhesive. It really secures everything down. So I'm going to position that, and then I'm going to go ahead and adhere these 2 layers to our layer with the brads. And the way you actually assemble your card is very important, because we are going to have the final one poke through 2 parts of it. So you want to make sure you're following the steps on how you assemble it. So you want to make sure you get to this point before you add your final brad. So now I'm going to take our fourth brad, stick that right through, close that guy up. There we go. Oh, really? Just kidding. I forgot about this guy. Luckily it's a brad. All right, pop that through there. Nobody saw it, just fast forward that part. And then push it down. Wah, wah, wah. Okay, so you want to make sure it's through that second layer paper. And then I'm going to peel off the backing here. Before I push it down, make sure it's nice and even. And I just have the adhesive here, so this raises up on both sides, which I really like. I like that added natural dimension to my card. So now I'm going to take the last two pieces, and I'm going to go ahead and peel off the Terrific tape and attach layer number 1 to the card base. And I am just going to start from down here. There we go. So it's not completely the same. It's not totally centered. It's a little less than a quarter here, but I'm okay with that. And then I'm going to peel off my Terrific tape here. So I just used a 1/4 inch and I went between all of the brads. So it's not, I don't have any adhesive over the brads. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And then I'm going to take my card here, center that, and press that down. So there we go. I gave you guys several embossing tips. I hope you enjoy it. Thank you so much for watching, and thanks again for getting Sparkle and Sprinkle up to 10,000 subscribers, everybody. I hope you have a fantastic holiday weekend, and if you have any comments, please leave them below. I love reading everybody's comments. And to all of our friends and family in Texas, we are thinking of you. Prayers and thoughts from Sparkle and Sprinkle. Thanks so much.